All right, good morning, members. It's gone 10:30, so can we make a start? It's quite a, I don't know whether it's a bulky or a heavy agenda we've got, so welcome to the meeting of the new Education and Learning Committee. This is the September meeting, the inaugural meeting. And I just remind members that the meeting will be recorded and subsequently made available to the public for listening purposes. So, Claire, do we have any Sederunt apologies?
Thank you, Chair. We've got a number of apologies this morning from the Vice Chair and from Councillors Karen Carruthers, Andrew Giusti and Ronnie Tate. We have everybody else. Tommy Sloan currently not present. Apologies. And everybody else present. We've got Directorate, Sam Scobie not present.
Okay, thanks, Claire. Declarations of interest. Do you have any declarations? No. Okay, so can we move on to item 3 on page 11, which is the Delegation to Education and Learning Committee. And this is a item for noting. Are we all happy to note that? Okay, item 4 on page 13. This is the Education and Learning Directorate Business Plan 2019-20 to 2022-23. The business plan is set out in detail here alongside the improvement plan, which is a requirement of our council by government, and the regional improvement plan to show how we work alongside our Ayrshire colleagues with Education Scotland. These plans are low weighted, set out for schools and their staff clear guidance on what is expected both locally and nationally. The performance of the schools and the local education authority is very strong, with improving attainment year on year. This performance is set out along with our risk register in Appendix A. Workforce info is summarised in Appendix 5, and financial breakdown is Appendix 6 on page 197. And we'll have Gillian and Sheila to answer any questions. Is there anything you want to add to the report?
No, thank you, Chair. By its nature, it's a big report because I thought it was important that we pulled together the regional plan as well as the local plan and the report that's got to go back nationally. And I'd like to reassure members that the areas for improvement in the performance report reflect to last year's data, and therefore we will be reporting back in either December or February on the 2019 data.
Members? Ivor?
Chair, my understanding is that through process we have to impact assess any policy that we take. If we have a budget that we want to put forward, it has to be impact assessed before we can agree it. Has this been impact assessed yet, as it's not up on the website?
No, we have not had opportunity to fully impact assess the business plan, but we have a date in the diary to do that.
Therefore, can we agree it today?
June?
When it went round for consultation, we were aware that the impact assessment had not yet been completed. The impact assessment will be completed within the next 3 weeks.
What happens if it comes back and says there's negative impacts that we can't agree with, but we've agreed the plan?
Is there a deadline that this has to be submitted by?
Not as far as I'm aware, no. This was our point in the schedule, so this was the point at which we were asked to bring this onto the agenda. But I can certainly, we can impact assessment. We have the risk register included within it, but we haven't impact assessed it in terms of equality. So we can certainly do that and bring that back if that's suitable.
Members be happy with that, if there's no deadline attached? Yeah, can we do that in that case? Just before we move on from that, if there's any other points that members want to make before it comes back again, so I've got Julie first.
Thank you. It was just a couple of comments regarding the transition we've spoken about within the document, mapping the additional support need learner journey. We've had a few concerns raised to the EIS regarding transition points for children, where through the summer there's maybe been a move of house and they've moved school, and when they go to the new school, the support and strategies that were agreed prior through their IEPs has not been put in place. And we've also had reports of a couple of incidents where children's support was agreed before the summer with parents, with the educational visitor. They've moved on to primary one and the support hasn't happened. So we're really pleased to see that you're going to map this journey, but we're wondering if there's something that can be done sooner rather than later. It's the perennial story, Gillian, of where things move on through the summer, changes to staff happen, and then what was agreed previously isn't supporting children.
Certainly, sorry, through Chair, that was raised at the Head Teacher Strategy Group on a couple of individual cases, and certainly Hugh and the team will be looking at that. If that has been raised with the LNCT, I don't know whether that has been picked up with the LNCT. Certainly if it was an issue raised with the EIS, I'm sure they'll have put it on the agenda for the LNCT next month.
I've got Ian, Adam and Willie. Ian?
Myself, Chair. I actually thought it was quite a good business plan, but the bit was missing for me, and I know we'll get a chance to see this again, obviously. It's been fully impact assessed, unless I've missed it, but we've got some big decisions to make around about the school estate. We'll see that later on in the report as part of that. So obviously, as we go forward over the next 5 years, I just wondered what effect would that possibly have on the business plan? I would thought it would have some kind of effect. I don't see it mentioned explicitly in there, but I thought it would be a correlation where there'd be an effect, because whatever way that goes, I thought it should have been in there.
I suppose, Chair, if I could come in there, the business plan is a live document to some extent, and we recognise that there'll be a significant number of developments and events over the coming months in terms of transformation, budget setting, which may or may not have an impact on the school estate. So clearly there may be an opportunity to reference that in November when we bring this back, or at a later stage.
Adam?
Sorry, just before I go on to the 2 points, I didn't quite hear what Gillian proposed in relation to Ivor's point. I just wondered if you could repeat that, Gillian.
On the one hand, I understand and recognise the importance of fully impact assessing the business plan, nor do I want to delay business. So I'd hope that we could take any points in relation to the business plan in terms of concerns that members would have. My only option at this time is to bring the business plan back for full agreement at the next committee, which is the middle of November, while recognising that I have to submit the plan to government in that time, and clearly business of the council has to continue. And I'm going this afternoon to Ayr to agree the regional improvement plan. So trying to balance the scrutiny function and also balance operational progression. I'm happy to take further advice as to how you would like me to progress.
Chair, may I? I mean, I don't think this is a major issue. The papers, Gillian, that you have to take to government and the regional plan are straightforward, and they don't need to be impact assessed. The business plan here needs to be impact assessed, and we can certainly bring that back in full in November. Happy to do so. I don't intend to tell all my team to stand down for the next 6 weeks. We will keep working on what's mainly in this document, but we'll reassure you in November. Okay.
So I suppose actually, I mean, the recommendations were only to agree the business plan. I think we could maybe sort of note in principle the business plan, but certainly maybe agree that I'm going to get the wording of the other reports plan, but the South West Improvement Collaborative Plan, I'm sure we could agree that, providing that actually that business plan, I think the impact assessment is important, but my understanding is the business plan is for the impact assessment is for that business plan, not necessarily all the documents that are in here. I do have 2 questions. So my first one is, there's a lot of good stuff in here, but what have we done to make sure that the views of our teachers and our parents and our pupils have been incorporated into this? And just on the South West Education Improvement Collaborative, I think I've asked this in the past, but my understanding is that the Education Governance Bill has pretty much been shelved. And I'm not entirely sure what role the improvement collaboratives are having, apart from collecting more data and trying to achieve objectives that seem to actually be the objectives of us as an education authority and of national government anyway. So I'm not quite sure what the added value of those improvement collaboratives are.
If I could pick up on the collaboratives, and maybe Gillian, you could pick up on any consultation. On the collaboratives, the governance isn't shelved. Government's not going to legislate, but there is an expectation in the joint agreement that we would look at head teacher charter, the development of the collaboratives, as well as parental engagement. For our collaborative, we actually are gaining quite a lot, councillor, because of the collaborative scale nature. We've sometimes felt a little bit isolated, and our teachers are enjoying the opportunity to work with families of schools in other parts of the region, in the Ayrshires rather. And we will continue to develop that incrementally, but it does have to only be added value. We're trying to get the balance between additional capacity that might be needed for some of the items against making sure that we've got things right in Dumfries and Galloway. But I think I could speak on behalf of Gillian as well, as to say that we are getting some value out of that collaborative, and we've got a good team of people and good other directors to work with there.
Thank you. And sorry, Chair, in terms of the parental involvement, the plan, it has to be, and we're pleased that it is, bottom up. So the consultation comes from the school improvement plan. So it's not as if we identify the priorities for the authority and then give them to schools directly. What we do in developing this plan is to look at the themes that have come from the school improvement plans and design our improvement plan from that. So although the plan in its entirety has not been consulted upon with parents, it has been shared with the Dumfries and Galloway Parent Carer Forum, and all the themes within it have come from the school community.
Willie?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, there's a number of references in the plan to additional support needs, and indeed I'm picking up one here in terms of performance information, and one of the things I noted here was parent satisfaction. So I was interested to hear what the EIS rep was saying in terms of transition from P7s to S1 in the schools, and whether indeed we have got this right. I was just at the Joint Safety Committee on Tuesday there, I believe, and there's a huge increase in the number of violent incidents, and this is continuing. And this is against a backdrop of £750,000 being taken out of additional support needs. And I just was interested in what Gillian was saying there in terms of the impact assessment. And I know that the Joint Safety Committee said that while they've asked for a report, and it's very much in education that was the highest numbers. So it's really for this committee, as the service committee, to scrutinise that and see what the real impact is going to be on the school children in taking out that £750,000, what effect that's going to have. And it was very much focused on cause and effect. Why we're having this. I don't think we've got bad wains. I think we've got an increase in the number with mental health, or poor mental health. And I think that's recognised, and the government is supposed to be anyway, putting more money into that to make sure that we're attending to that. So I think for this committee, we need to be in getting an impact assessment, but we've got to be scrutinising, you know, the effect of taking out £750,000 and whether indeed we are delivering for the kids, because they will need extra support in terms of mental health as they go through school. So I think, you know, in terms of the business plan, we should be doing a lot more scrutiny, and that was what was coming out of the Joint Safety Committee, because the trade unions are seeing that in their members, in the effect that is having on their staff, as well as the number of violent incidents. So for the committee just to pass this, I don't think that would be right. I think we need to scrutinise this, and whether indeed taking that amount of money, what the effect has. When I asked you some time ago, you did say, Gillian, it would be a challenge, but we could cope. I don't know if we are coping within the schools, and that's why we need to scrutinise this much, much greater.
Director?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Clearly, we're not passing the business plan today, so it's helpful that there will be a paper, an updated paper on the Learning Support Review coming to November, alongside this, and that'll be an opportunity to do that then.
In terms of first term speakers, I've got George, Kelly and John Young, and then Julie is the second. So George.
That again, I just want to reiterate what the councillor said there, and from some of my own experiences, when we talk about mental health, closing the attainment gap, disadvantaged children, I think we would be very wise, and I mentioned this before, not to stereotype disadvantaged children through poverty or having obviously identifiable issues, but we know, and I sit on the review committee of the assisted support learning, that a lot of the issues are just levels of anxiety that children are having, and that could be caused by some underlying issue. But when we talk about getting it right for every child, and I know the massive challenge, and I know the effort that the council and teachers and schools are putting into it, but it is an issue that is somehow, it's not forgotten, but it's shelved to a certain extent. And I know from speaking to parents, a lot of parents speak to me because my own kids have been through various things. A lot of parents speak to me just to discuss things about the issues with their children, and there's stories in there where these kids are severely disadvantaged because of the maybe lack of funding, lack of expertise in schools, and there's a massive opportunity for Dumfries and Galloway to take some sort of lead in that by recognising that kids are not achieving what they might achieve, and more importantly, they're maybe not enjoying their school life for various reasons, and some early intervention and good teacher engagement, teachers with better training, teachers who have got support from psychologists and things like that, it could make a massive difference. I know that most kids go through school and most parents will say they've had a good enough experience, but a lot of these kids are getting missed. And I hold my hand up, my children have this problem, but as I say, from conversations I've had with many parents that are in good financial positions or bad financial positions who have got children that are not doing as well as or being as happy at school as they could be. And I think we can look into it through this business plan to try and support schools, parents, teachers, everything, to make sure that every child does get the opportunity that these individuals are merited.
Thank you. And I know we've talked about these issues before. It's sad to hear if there are indeed many parents who are dissatisfied, or many children who are not doing as well as they should do. And I would urge you and the other Parent Carer Forum reps that if you do know of parents that feel they can't come to talk to us about their child's experience, that they speak to the child's school in the first instance, or to myself, or to Vanessa Morris as the Parental Engagement Officer. We've got a paper later on today on parental involvement and engagement. And if there are people who really feel that their child is not getting a fair crack at the whip, you need to come and talk to us, because that's not the picture I see, but I completely hear what you're saying.
One of the issues a lot of parents have is a lack of awareness of who to speak to. And there have been parents that feel that maybe the individual teacher that's involved is not quite getting it through no fault of the teacher, probably may not have the training. But again, from personal experience, I'm sorry to be anecdotal, but I'm reasonably engaged, as you can tell. But when my boy in the second year at secondary school became anxious, out of the blue, all of a sudden, I didn't know where to go, but I was educated enough, confident enough to go and speak to his tutor teacher and all the rest of it. But beyond that, that particular teacher didn't know where to go, because he said, I don't know what to do now, because my boy couldn't get into school. And that won't be an isolated issue, and I'm really sorry to be anecdotal, and I'm obviously fairly passionate about it, but it's not about my kids. It's about kids in a similar position that don't really need to know where to go to, particularly parents that may have not had any great involvement with schools. You know, they don't feel the need to be, they trust the school. Where do you go? Where is the path for parents who are worried about their children? And not all schools, not all teachers are the same. I think my plea is to get support for teachers as much as anything else, so that every school should have somebody, an educational psychologist, that can intervene early, offer the right solutions. And I would say you get somebody senior to do that, because getting somebody senior in, they can assess the situation and work with the parents. But I totally accept it's a minority, but it's a big minority.
June?
I mean, there's a lot in there, and I'm repeating myself. I think there's I would hope that a class teacher that they would never say, I don't know where to go, because there's always a hierarchy within a school, through a principal teacher, through the deputy head teacher, through the school management team, through the parental involvement team, through the central team. There's a great deal of resource and experience to support children and families. So I would like, if we're not clear, or if class teachers are not clear where those supports are, we can do all we can to make sure that we signpost people appropriately. We've got some really good work in terms of early intervention in our youth work, because it's not always teachers that hold the answers, it's accessing support from other partners as well. So we'll work with you and with Mel and with Vanessa in terms of making sure our messages are as clear as possible. And of course, there's also elected members. If parents are unhappy or unclear, they can go directly to their elected member, and we'll certainly explore these things with them.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Can I also add, for reassurance, the government is making mental health a real prominent issue, as you know, and funding will be forthcoming to see 320 counsellors across the country, or the funding for 320 counsellors across the country, one for each secondary school. Now, the recruitment of that might be a wee bit of a challenge, but there is funding coming to recognise the import of mental health.
Kenny?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to ask about what's identified as one of the risks on page 222 is the failure of IT systems and processes which support pupils and staff. I'll not get anecdotal either, but obviously the first couple of weeks of term has been extremely difficult for teachers and for staff. The kind of things pretty fundamental to learning and teaching, kids can't get access to their work. It says here one of the mitigations is regular evaluations of performance with BTS. A lot of teachers are asking me to pose the point, do BTS know how schools work? Do they understand that someone working in an office situation in a corporate setting, their technical requirements are very, very different from a teacher or teachers in a school where we've got teachers sharing classrooms, having to log in, taking 10 minutes. We've got kids sitting there doing nothing for a long time. Where are we with that in terms of, do we know the impact that this IT has had over the first couple of weeks of term, and the evaluation with BTS, is that going to be made a little bit more public? Do we know how that's going to work?
Okay, thanks. That's a very good question. As a former secondary math teacher myself, I totally understand what it's like in a classroom when the IT isn't working. Yeah, we did have quite a lot of concerns about how the rollout of Windows 10 went with the secondaries in the first fortnight. Had a lot of discussion with BTS about that. We're going to have 3 mini reviews of why that was so difficult. One with BTS, one with some head teachers and one with some staff. And we will learn the lessons from that before we attempt to roll out with primary. But again, I absolutely understand why that's been so difficult for teachers, and we need to learn from it. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I read this business plan with interest, and I find it very full and informative, so thank you very much for that. It talks about Dumfries and Galloway being data rich on page 71, and further on it says, last year the effective use of data was one area identified for improvement. Could I ask what sort of training and staff receive over the region, and is there a consistency of software that allows them to analyse the data that the systems produce?
Okay, so there's a huge amount of data that's coming into schools, whether that be in the form of examination results or achievement of a level information. What we've been working on, we've had nationally support from Scholar as part of the Scottish National Standardised Assessment, and they have run seminars within the local authority for staff to attend. But we have felt we've taken the feedback from our staff and are now creating our own bespoke training to support class teachers right through to head teachers on that analysis of the data that's actually going to help inform next steps in learning for our young people. In relation to the senior phase data and the Scottish, the national qualifications results, the Insight is a national facility that's available for all schools to use. We have an Insight ambassador in every school who meets regularly with myself and Gwyneth Fairbairn in relation to exactly that, working on the analysis of the data. And then as part of an attainment
review and progress report working with the schools, we would have that discussions with the schools. So there's quite a robust system in place. But I think it's it would be fair to say that we have listened to what our staff have said and that we have created support that will help meet their needs and not necessarily the needs of people right across Scotland, because sometimes it's not tailored to what our teachers are asking us for. Thanks.
I've got Jim McComb as a first-time speaker, then Julie and Adams as second time. Jim?
Thanks, Chair. I'm looking at page 80, the table at the bottom on the spending pattern of PEF money. Now, given the emphasis on literacy and numeracy, is it not surprising that the spend of PEF on numeracy is as low as 3.21%? I would really have expected a much higher level of spend than that. Is there an explanation?
It is to the head teacher and the school community's discretion, and the point of PEF is that it's certainly something that we have discussed. It's certainly something that we have encouraged head teachers to make sure that their PEF spend is balanced, and we expect all head teachers to submit their PEF report. But ultimately, if the school and the school community target their PEF in that direction, then that's their decision.
Julie?
Thank you. It was just to reiterate the issue Kenny had brought up about the rollout of the Windows 10. Now, there were significant issues, so much so that the EIS have actually put in a formal complaint about this and will be bringing a paper to LNCT as well. I think because it had such a huge impact on learning and teaching, and I just want to say that this is something that's impacted children at transition point as well. So we've got children who, with additional needs, were promised access to word processing facilities and move to high school, and they still don't have access to that. In fact, the school have written out and said to parents, you can supply your own laptop, but we've not got any school ones available due to an issue with IT, which I find appalling when it's been something that's been agreed. So it's really just to reiterate that, you know, this is a huge issue. When the IT fails, it has such a big impact, not just on learning and teaching, but also on children's health and well-being. Because you've got children who are being forced to handwrite who already have a difficulty in that area. And for me, that's a big concern. Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And Adam?
So I had a question on the back of Kenneth's question, but I think that Julie has actually just answered it for me, is that, you know, I was aware that there were some issues on the first couple of days back, but I mean, my question is there still issues with that IT equipment? And we can review rollouts all we like, but actually, I mean, what isn't working and what is working? I think, you know, the future for this council and for local authorities as a whole is to see, you know, a much more digital participation within our schools, and I'd be very concerned if actually 3 weeks into the school term there's still some issues that are not working, particularly to include young people with additional support needs, and to give them as big education as possible. It would be quite useful for the committee to understand exactly where we're at, what isn't working, and actually what the timescale is to get that fixed. And, you know, very concerned that the EIS has actually felt it's so important that they've had to put in a formal complaint about it. And I think this is the first time I've actually heard of that happening.
Certainly, I can get a status report. We're keeping a close eye on this and all of the commitments that have been made to schools. As Colin mentioned, there are 3 levels of review ongoing. We took the decision some years ago that most of the work to prevent disruption, ironically, the work would be done in school holidays, and therefore the consequence of that was that there were not 21,000 children available to test the robustness of the system. So as soon as the children came back, we had some issues that we weren't able to test over the summer period. So we might have to review the way that we roll work out, because clearly doing it within the summer holiday period did not work. But I agree, we need to be very clear as to what has been left to do, what has been prioritised and what impact that has. And I'm happy to give a status report to members.
Well, very brief, but I think it's an interesting subject matter that's just been brought up. I wasn't aware of it actually. So, but I do think it merits a report back to this committee in regards to the progress that's been made. It's okay getting a status and things happening internally, the impact that it's had and could potentially have. And I say that in the back of, the Audit, Risk and Scrutiny Committee did a review in regards to information sharing, so we got into all sides of the information technology subject, and I think it would be interesting to see what actually really has caused this, how it could have been prevented, and any potential preventions or even resource that needs allocated if that's the case. Hopefully not, but we need to understand that it's too much of a negative impact potentially.
Chair, I'm very happy to ask BTS colleagues to prepare with us a paper for November to give you an update. Okay.
Willie?
Is the problem fixed? Because I'm just, like Ian, I just heard this morning, and I had to go out and take a phone call there, but I heard Adam speaking. But is the problem fixed? Because we've got kids moving in to exam years and everything else, and every minute is crucial to them, and it's, if the IT is down, then we face huge problems. Is it fixed?
Good morning. I thought I'd come in and try and give a bit of clarity around where we are with the IT. Much of the initial issues that we found on the first day back, as Gillian explained, have been resolved. Logins are, they were taking a long time because when you logged into Windows 10, what has happened is we've rolled out Windows 10 across the estate, and when you logged into Windows 10 the first time, it had to pull down all the necessary certification, etc. And because obviously everybody was doing it at the same time, the whole system ground to a halt. And what happens is, because we're not patient people, are we cancel it and start it again, which then added another one to the queue and another one to the queue and another one to the queue. So we have resolved that, and the logging in problems are broadly sorted. There's one or two pockets which are intermittent and they're not happening to the same people at the same times. So we're working through those on an individual basis to get to the bottom of what's causing slower logins for some staff. As a result of the slower logins, obviously the network capacity was taken up, which meant that then internet access was a problem. Many of our systems and processes are internet-based software. That can't be allowed to continue, and that's part of the review that we're undertaking at the moment. That has absolutely got to be. So, for example, CMIS, our MIS system, where we take our pupil attendance every morning, that runs across the internet. If we can't take attendance, we don't know pupils are safe, we had to revert to manual systems. That's not acceptable. So we're working with our schools to make sure that there are backup processes in place in some of these critical areas, but we're also working with our technical colleagues at BTS to make sure that the issues are resolved as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, though, much of our software in schools is old software, and we've had it for a long period of time, some of which is licensed, and we have some of which the licenses have expired on. So we're working through that. Much of that software will not be compatible with Windows 10. It's the nature of technology. It moves on very quickly. We are working with, and our proposal is that we work with the subject specialist groups of staff to understand their needs in terms of software to use in their delivering the curriculum. And those staff groups will then be able to inform the decision that's made as to the software that is used as a replacement where a replacement is necessary. Where it's an upgraded license, we're working through the upgraded licenses to make sure that those are purchased as soon as possible and made available. Nobody wanted this situation at the start of term. This should have been a really good news story. We've invested about £250,000, £260,000 in new hardware and upgraded hardware for secondary schools, on top of the money that was invested for the Wi-Fi enhancements that this committee oversaw. We had hoped that the first days back this year were going to be a really good news story in secondary schools, where they had much better equipment, working much more effectively, and being able to deliver better learning and teaching as a result of that. That hasn't happened. I'm currently working through with my team why that hasn't happened and into the nitty-gritty of every aspect of that. And I'm more than happy to bring a report back to committee for you to find out what has gone on.
Can I come back in? But Chair, the answer to my question is it's not fixed. So it is. And I think the committee needs some assurance, because I heard more than once there, it's going to be fixed as soon as possible. We need to know when it is fixed. No wait till November to see everyone's okay. Could we get something out to us to say when it's going to be fixed and that it has been fixed?
Susan, can you send out a status?
Sorry, thank you. The basic accesses and the most pressing problems are fixed. They are resolved. Teachers are using technology in the classroom. That's not to say it's without glitches, and that's not to say there aren't further problems that we need to investigate. But broadly, across the estate, across the secondary estate, technology is back up and running and being used for learning and teaching. But I'm happy after today to get something back to you quicker than a full report, but I can get something back to you today to outline the areas where we are still working on it.
And Tracy?
Sorry. Don't want to add to this because it's a bad enough situation it is, but there are actually students who start when they change over their year a few weeks before the summer holidays and they've got weeks of work, their work is lost. That has happened. Higher and advanced higher music students who have made full compositions or are so far along in their compositions, it's gone and they're having to start again, and that's seriously demoralising. So that's a worry.
Absolutely, and that's related to the software that's been used, and for whatever reasons, again, part of my current investigation, the information about it's a piece of software called Sibelius, and Sibelius is we knew that the new version of Sibelius, it will be replaced, it is being replaced. In fact, it should be on systems as I'm sitting here, but I need to check that. We knew that the way that Sibelius software works, even if that had been seamless, which it wasn't, but even if it had been, you do lose previous content. And that was always a known factor, but somehow that information didn't get to class teachers so that they were aware of that. Now, I need to understand why that has happened, because that information was known. So we need to make sure that that impact is minimised for those young people and they get the support they need to get back on track with the new software once it's ready.
Julie, and then we'll move on.
Thank you. Just, would it not have been more sensible to ask staff what software they were using before you did the rollout, to check that it was compatible, and perhaps to have done one school first to iron out any difficulties, rather than us all, staff and pupils coming back to kind of chaos? And the thought of, pupils losing work like that, that is just awful. So I would suggest, if you're doing another rollout, perhaps pilot it somewhere first and actually speak to the staff on the ground to find out what they use. And then you can mitigate against, rather than waiting, because you said you're going to speak to the subject specialists and find out what's needed. Well, in my mind, I would have done that first. So perhaps that's a wee lesson there that we've learned as a council, that we need to think about that first.
Absolutely, and there were lists of software collected. Unfortunately, there are 480 items of software used across our schools, so they can't all be prioritised, and the work was done to prioritise those that had a direct impact on learning and not the pieces of software that are used less frequently. So that work was done so that the initial rollout could take that into account, but we accept that there's further software that still needs looked at and needs considered. And in terms of a pilot, I guess that comes back to what Gillian said in terms of how we roll this out. We've traditionally used summer holidays to have the least disruption, hopefully, on learning. However, if you do use summer holidays, you can't test it till they come back. So there were tests done on the rollout of Windows 10 and the operating requirements of a curricular network prior to this rollout, and they worked satisfactorily. There were a few glitches that were ironed out so that the image that went into schools was an image that we knew would work. That testing was done. However, we can't get that test of the users logging on until they come back. So it does mean that we're needing to rethink, as Gillian said, whether this type of rollout is suitable for a holiday period or not. Either way, though, if we do it during term time, there's a disruption to learning. So we need to try and mitigate against all of these factors to try and move forward in the best way for the learners.
finally, David.
I'm sorry, Chair, to interrupt, but where are we with Wi-Fi speed? I've got an app on my phone where I can measure, and at home I got a download about 30 or something, and I was in Gretna, and it was almost double, and uploading was about 3 times what here. I've just checked it in here just now, and it's doing it 3 point something for both of them. Where are we across the area with Wi-Fi speed? Are we getting a good service to the schools, or have we difficulties?
Again, I can bring you back details on that, but broadly speaking, across our secondary estate, which is the estate that we've just had the rollout in, we are achieving somewhere, we have 100 meg connections going into those schools. So in fact, the download speeds should be working well. But what we can do is we can monitor that on a daily basis, and I can produce some statistical analysis so that you can see what that's like. Less so in our primary estate, and some of the connections in our primary estate aren't as good as we want them to be. And you'll remember that part of the Wi-Fi upgrade, we had hoped to do a year 2 primary upgrade. Some of that's being picked up through SOCEP funding, and we're being able to upgrade some of our poorest connections in some of our rural areas in our primary schools, and that work's ongoing. But I can include that in an IT report that comes back so that you can see the detail, if that's acceptable.
Can we move to the recommendation? Obviously, due to the impact assessment, can we allow Claire to correct me, to note the education and learning businessmen, and not agree awaiting completion of the impact assessment with a further report coming to the November meeting of the committee? Yep. Okay. Ian?
Will it just be an action, or do we need to agree we'll get a further report in regards to that last subject matter? Should that be a further recommendation? We have agreed to have a further report in regards to this whole IT subject and how it's failed.
And the IT role. Move to item 5, the senior phase strategy, page 225. Okay, this senior phase strategy has been developed in conjunction with a range of key stakeholders and partners, sets out for members' plans for developing a senior phase offering all our schools, which is ambitious and dynamic as it can be to meet the needs of all our learners. The strategy aligns with our overarching council priority to provide the best start in life and commitment to secure improvement in employability skills and sustain positive destinations for all our young people, as well as our aspiration to achieve excellence and equity for all. It highlights the importance of schools and partners working together, being able to offer and develop curriculum opportunities which will prepare young people for success in a modern, forward-thinking society, and capitalises on opportunities to thrive in an evolving economy for the 21st century. This strategy sets out an ambitious agenda which will challenge traditional options in the senior phase by giving parity of esteem to both academic and vocational pathways, and the type of qualifications, as well as allowing schools to be creative and flexible in their delivery options. And we have Sheila to speak to it. Is there anything you want to add to the report, Sheila?
Just to say that this is a culmination of a piece of work that we've been working with across our range of stakeholders, young people, parents, and the range of wide partners that we work with across our schools. I think it addresses or provides a framework which will help us address some of the issues that are currently being faced in the senior phase part of our secondary schools, particularly given that the number of young people who stay beyond S4 has increased, and that what has always been in place traditionally may not always necessarily have met their needs. So it gives us a framework to start looking at the way we deliver, the way we work together with partners to extend the range of options that are available to our young people. I think it's fair to say that 35% of our school population move on to higher education, 65% don't, and they move into further education, training and employment. If our senior phase is only catering for those that are travelling on to higher education, then we're at risk of not meeting the needs of the majority of our learners.
Thanks, Stephen. I do think it is the parity of the offer which is.
Thanks, Chair. It's good to see that we're trying to extend the options available to our senior pupils, and we're going to improve specialisation, depth and rigour. So the question I've got is that quite often there's not enough people to do 6-year courses in our secondary schools, and they have to. And I've got one pupil from Anne who was supposed to be going to Dumfries for 6-year English. Obviously, this takes a lot of time and it costs money. We just question whether we've got the video conference available in our schools or Skyping available that travel wouldn't be necessary.
That's certainly part of the agenda moving forward. As digital learning becomes increasingly more important, and I think given the discussions that we were having in the previous item, we absolutely understand that this is key. The investment that's come through SOCEP into the digital hubs will start to move this agenda forward, with 4 of our secondary schools piloting that over this session, along with a facility within the Bridge and Stranraer campus, Dumfries College and Dumfries and Galloway College. So we'll be looking at how we extend that across our estate as we move forward.
I think it would be useful if we have a section of that in the report which has come to the November meeting about the digital hubs, because I do think they're going to be very important in the future to enable youngsters to become involved in what isn't their home schools effectively.
And just to add to that, tomorrow we're having a senior phase conference which is inviting our head teachers and deputies across the authority coming to meet at the Bridge, and one of the presenters is eSchool, which is the Highlands and Islands digital learning platform that they're coming to talk to us about how they have developed that as a learning platform moving forward.
Willie?
Yeah, Chair, I think it's correct in terms of Sheila reported, and I'm pleased to see we have a framework, but that framework's got to work. And only yesterday at the area committee, Wigton Area Committee, we had a monitoring report where the target figures, we had failed on the target figures, and they were exceptionally low in terms of the kids moving on, finding work experience. Can we do a lot more for these kids in terms of within the framework to make sure they do get this work experience and that those figures increase, because they were exceptionally low, and we have asked for a report back because of this. So, if we are failing the kids, we need to do something within the framework to make sure, and I don't know if it's just the Wigtown area where there's a particular problem, but it's something that had to do with Gateway closing and moving their office, and that's just not good enough. I think we owe this to the kids who do not go on to higher education. They're equally as valuable and to be valued, and we need to be doing a lot more. Can I get that assurance?
Sure.
I can give you that assurance insofar as that I know that both our new head teachers, both in Douglas Ewart and Stranraer, have absolutely put as their priority the curriculum that's being offered within the senior phase and the opportunities that the young people have both in Stranraer and in the Douglas Ewart will be, I hope, very different moving forward.
George?
Yeah, I really welcome this, and I've got personal involvement in my role in agriculture. We've piloted 50 school courses on farms with a qualification, which is a big credit to Dumfries and Galloway, because it's a Dumfries and Galloway qualification, which now NFU Scotland and Dumfries and Galloway have made available to other areas. From a personal involvement, the real challenge is there's still a challenge within parents and teachers, it has to be said, about the priority they give to what they call academic, and almost vocation is a second-class citizen. The one comment I'd make in speaking to a lot of educationalists, we need to get away from this binary idea of academic or vocational, because a lot of academic people are also vocational. So I really welcome this development across the country. But we have got challenges in our own experience. It was getting into schools to explain to the teachers the benefits and the pathways into an agricultural education and career. So one of the efforts we have to make is with industry to get them to work with the careers advisors, the course advisors of the other options. You know, we've, with the barony and with the local education people, we've got a pathway now that demonstrates how you can move up and down a pathway, across a pathway, but that really needs to be promoted further, and it has to be done within schools. So I think making it easier for schools or particular people within schools to engage with industry will be a barrier that we need to break down.
We've set up a senior phase working group which has a senior management member from each secondary school sitting on it, so that we have somebody at the highest level where the decisions are being made within schools to make sure that the information is absolutely passed through to parents, and to ensure that our staff are engaging, because it's not simply just parents having that understanding that this is how they want the pathway to progress, but it's also to think about, we talked about the data-rich schools, but what's the data actually telling us about the performance of our youngsters, and where would be the best next steps for them. I think the success in relation to the rollout of foundation apprenticeships, and the fact that we have significantly increased the number of youngsters undertaking a foundation apprenticeship in the senior phase this session, I think is that for that very reason, in that we've been trying to put that parity of esteem with one route against another.
Robert?
Yeah, just to say I welcome the report. I think it's an excellent idea, and I think that getting the curriculum right actually shapes lives very positively. If we get that sorted, an awful lot of other issues and problems are resolved as well. So I welcome the report. I look forward to the follow-up in a few months' time.
Thanks, Robert. Doug?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Sheila, very positive report, stroke vision. Yeah, absolutely. Agree with everybody else in the room. Fantastic work. Hope it works out and going forward. Thank you.
Ivor?
Chair, just to echo the sentiments so far, I think this is something that too often we do concentrate on higher education, and I think there are other routes where children can blossom to get to their full potential, and I think this addresses some of those routes. You know me, like a daft laddie question. Second recommendation, agree to receive a report on the outcome of the consultation. I've read through the report, but I couldn't see anything referring to consultation. I just wondered what that was referring to, please.
Yeah, I had the same problem. David?
Thanks, Chair. It's a lot of our problem, not the schools at all, but it's out there in the public eye, if you like, where they are not willing to bring forward training for youngsters leaving school. You talk about apprenticeships. The businesses should be supplying the apprenticeships and training the youngsters for what they want done. No leaving it to education to train them, and then they'll turn around and tell the Waynes, oh, you didn't have the proper training. And they just didn't seem to want to do it. I think maybe with the setup of the bridge, that might be a start. But if you go back, oh God, I love many folk can go back that far. But it used to be a case of when you left school, you could pick your apprenticeship. That doesn't seem to be available nowadays. And do you not see that as a big issue as well?
It is an issue with regards, but I think it goes back to the progression pathways and making sure that we are working with industry and developing that pathway through so that youngsters can see, and obviously that opportunity to get as much experience in the workplace during their senior phase. To help us do that, what we have done is we've taken the decision to work with all our schools to become what we call Scottish Curriculum Qualification, SCQF framework schools, which means that they promote the wide range of qualifications, not just the traditional National 5 hires and advanced hires, but all sorts of industry type qualifications as well, so that we're helping, working with the industry to move forward. So I absolutely agree with you. If we could find lots of jobs, it would be great.
George?
Yeah, the councillor's absolutely right, but I'm not wishing to repeat myself, but it is there are a three-cornered stool here. We need the educational providers to provide the courses that employers value, that's useful to the young people to create a career opportunity. And we need to see these modern apprentices, whatever profession, and seeing that as a career CV. And what we've had to do in agriculture is to explain to the employers that we need smart kids with good training on our farms to be more productive, to be mitigating climate change. So the big challenge is for us is to get employers to accept the value of skills and training, and for young people and society to value people with these skills. And back to the pathways, we have a young person who's gone, our ambition is to go from a 16-year-old modern apprenticeship at level 2 to get a degree while in work all that time. And the universities are really buying into that, so we need society, the general public, to buy into it, that it's not a second-class occupation, and you can get a degree through the skills pathway. So it's education of the employers, of the young people, of the schools, that there's a different pathway, not to say it's any better or any worse than the academic pathway, but we need to explain and remind employers that we need skilled people. We're in a really competitive society, so we need skilled people. And these young folk might be different from the high achievers, if you like, but they can be high achievers if they're nurtured properly.
The crucial aspect is there are jobs there at the end of the day, very well paid, highly skilled jobs. Mel?
Sorry, another parent. I was just going to say, when I was part of the group that did this, and the message that I've always tried to say is we need to remember that it's the parents' attitude as well. When we were at school, the landscape for jobs was completely different. We were told if you were clever, you went to uni. Well, I was told, maybe not you. If you were clever, you went to uni, and if you weren't quite so bright, you went to the tech. And we need to remember that the landscape is so different now. The opportunities available for kids are staggering now, and the pathways to get to those are so different and so varied that it can work for every child. But we need to have that information as parents to be able to change our mindsets as well. So it's coming from schools, but it can come thicker and faster, maybe.
Thanks, Mel. We move to the recommendations. Can we agree 2.1? And can we agree 2.2 with the change in the wording to agree to receive a further report on the progress of the strategy? Okay. So if we move to item 6 on 231, parental engagement. Okay. Members are asked to agree the final parental involvement and engagement strategies that are identified in appendices 1, 2 and 3 that were initially tabled in November 2018. Members may also wish to view additional support leaflets that have been produced in response to ongoing engagement with parents and parent councils. These have been shared on the Dumfries and Galloway website under the parental involvement. A summary of the most recent National Parental Survey has also been appended to the report for elected member information, although the Council will not be in receipt of the full report until later in the year. And we have Vanessa to speak to this. Vanessa, is there anything you want to add to the report?
Just to inform members that when this was first tabled in November, there are additional appendices which included the complaints process for parents in the strategy, and also information about involvement in the appointment of head teachers and senior leaders. So those have been included now and updated. What came out of the work and the engagement with parents for the strategy was a request from parents and from parent councils for shorter documents, an A4 double-sided flyer that would actually give them key links and information to help their working relationships with schools and working with the authority. So as I say, a series of leaflets have been produced in response to working with our parents and our parent councils. And the authority obviously has worked very closely with the Dumfries and Galloway Parent Council Forum to ensure that these are accessible. Thank you.
Members? Willie?
Yeah, Chair, again, I come back to the additional support for support needs of kids, and I was delighted at the last Sederunt Academy Parent Council where there was a parent that had a kid who was going through the additional support needs, and she was able to give some information and clarity as what was going on. But is there any way, or for the committee to agree, without imposing anything on parent councils, but for a report like that to be mandatory to an A4, as you say, just to say how we are doing in additional support needs, so that as members and parents they can see if there is no one on there, the parent councils that have a child or know what those additional needs are, then a lot of this time it's lost. And as I say, I was delighted when there was a parent there that did have that experience. So could we, from the head teachers, make it mandatory to say, look, this is what we're doing for additional support needs, so that we can get a flavour, and I mean an unfettered report as to how they're coping in the circumstances with a huge cut in ASN.
Can I just come back on 2 points there? One is one of the sets of information talking to parents was a leaflet that's produced, which is about working with our partners. And in that, there's clear information about working with local organisations like the Parental Inclusion Network. So that was seen as a key thing to support parents in their voice in terms of children with any learning difficulties or disabilities. In addition, some ongoing work with the Dumfries and Galloway Parent Carer Council Forum and our own corporate development unit. We've looked and created a draft training module for parent councils, which is actually looking at inclusion of parents into your parent council, because we've identified that when you look around the membership of a parent council, it can be quite limited. So we are looking at how we can broaden that inclusion. And obviously, again, we're also encouraging parent councils to also invite pupil councils along at least once a year, so that the pupil council voice is heard directly in that forum.
I'm not sure if that answers. I think it's for the committee to determine, Chair. Just, because those that need that additional support sometimes feel excluded, and it's hard to get parents along to parent councils or be engaged. And what I'm saying is, if there was a report, as a mandatory report, just to see how the schools are doing to deliver the additional support needs, whether that is possible or whether it's acceptable to the parent councils, given they set their own agenda. I just feel that we need to include, rather than sometimes they feel excluded.
Chair? Yeah, I'm not 100% sure what you're asking, Councillor Scobie, but if it's a report to go to parent councils on how the school's doing with learning support, clearly there's issues around confidentiality that would need to be considered. However, perhaps a better time to discuss this would be in the November paper, when we're updating you on how things are going with the learning support review. I suppose there'll be no councillor in here who would have liked to have taken 100 million in revenue out of the council over the last 10 years. We've got major challenges ahead, and what I think you're saying is that with the reductions that have had to be made, we're trying to make sure that everything's targeted to ensure that the kids are still getting the same Directorate support. And although there was a 750,000 reduction, it was around management. And the number of hours that the young people are receiving are exactly the same as last year. But we still recognise there's a big challenge ahead, because actually there's an increasing demand, and that's the big challenge.
Okay, members. George?
I'll just give it a sit in the Dumfries Parent Forum, and Mel obviously is the chairman at the moment. one of the challenges that Vanessa has identified and the discussions have identified is getting a wider diversity of parents on school councils. I've been involved for 10, 12 years now, and we've put a lot of effort into it, but it's very difficult to get. Many parents just believe the school can take responsibility of their children and they have no interest in it until something goes wrong. What we really need is parents on there that are willing to give up their time for the benefit of all the kids in the school and the teachers and all the rest of it. But it's an ongoing problem. We have to get proper, really effective engagement from a more generic and collegiate effort rather than some parents are coming on with single issues and things like that. So it's a diplomatic issue we have to make sure we get the right parents and are a non-exclusive set of parents that really get involved for all the right reasons. But we have made a lot of progress, and Dumfries and Galloway have been very helpful in that respect. But at the moment, it's still an underutilised resource, parental involvement, and it's something that we're desperate to get more involvement for the benefit of the teachers, the school, everything sort of style. But with all these things, if you've got volunteers, they may have a limited knowledge, so it's up to, and that's the efforts that I've been trying to give parents more accessible information so that they understand the bigger pictures and things like that. So that's all been done. All we can ask is that continues to be done, and as parents that we try and evolve greater engagement from parents.
Sorry, just jump on just to say these leaflets are great and they will be really useful for parents who are taking on parent councils, because often you take on a role in a parent council and it's always been done that way and it's maybe not always been done how it potentially was meant to have been done. So to get these leaflets and make them parent-friendly language, make them really accessible, I do believe they will really help with the parents understanding how they can help support the school and how they can support all the parents. It will make it easier to see what their role is, because sometimes those are really blurred, and hopefully head teachers will look at them too, so that head teachers will understand the role of parent councils a bit better sometimes too. But they're great leaflets.
Right, members, can we move to the recommendations? Can we approve 2.1? 2.2 and 2.3 and note 2.4. Thank you. So moving on to item 7 on page 297, properties, buildings, schools, asset class update. Okay. This paper provides members an overview of the financial position at the end of June this year and highlights projects with a significant financial change, either due to movement across financial years or a variance of actual project costs. It's also brought to members' attention that funding within the capital allocation for early learning and childcare has been reprofiled to financial year 2020-2021 to align more accurately with the physical works. Finally, members are asked to consider for agreement the updated primary school capacities contained within Appendix 3. And we have Lauren to speak to this. Can I just remind members, if they want to ask about individual schools within their wards, they do so with the officer out with the meeting. Otherwise, we could be here for quite a long time. Lauren, is there anything you want to add to me?
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, I think the attached report and appendices with it presents a position that we would expect to be in at this point within the financial year. I think given across a 3-year capital programme, there are numerous number of projects that have financial movement from the timing that they're at within the process that they go through. I think what I'd like to draw your attention to, however, is within Appendix 2, we've pulled out the projects with significant movement or projects that are of a value of 250k or above. And just to talk through one of them to try and give a deeper understanding of where the movement comes from, if we looked at, for example, Sandhead Primary School, originally there was a budget allocation of around £275,000. Now that value is based on evidence we have at that point in time on condition survey information. So that value is purely looking to address what that report states at that point in time. Between that point
and the change to the 560,000, we've been to the school, we've worked with the school around what the brief and the specification needs to include. So the jump actually isn't a deterioration in condition and a worsening of the school. It's actually including other things that address the suitability, address functionality, and adds other different bits and pieces to the project. That value at that point then is what actually goes out to the marketplace to be costed, and a contractor bids in to deliver all of those works. So the last value is the one that's really important for us as a service to manage and make sure that there's no creep or change on that value at that point in time. Thank you, Chair.
Members? And not about specific schools. Vic?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. A couple of years ago, the Scrutiny Committee looked at the projects and about overspends and changes in the contracts, which, like Brownhall School, which led to vast increases in prices. Have we learned from that scrutiny review, and is there further lesson to be learned from the overspends in this case?
Absolutely. I think one of the challenges with a 3-year programme is how much time and effort do you put into being accurate on year 3 projects, when really the priority and the focus needs to be on year 1 projects. So we need to have a value in against everything that sits on the page there so that it can be accounted for. However, it's that movement to sign off when the project scope and specification has been costed through property and architectural services and through external quantity surveyors. That's the freeze point. It's where that then a change comes along, or an increase in a costing for a certain element of the work. It's that part there that's really critical, and that's the bit that we'll bring back to members. And if there's any change in the timing of the project, i.e. there's an extension of time required beyond 50 days, or if there's an increase in value of 10%, the detail specifically to that project will be brought back to committee for members to scrutinise.
Can we move to the recommendations? Well, Willie?
Yeah, Chair, I hear what Lauren's saying in terms of, he's referred to Sandhead Primary School, and it's difficult not to, but my point here is that I think we need to look at the buildings and perhaps make toilets a priority within the asset, within the building. And I'm particularly looking at Laswell and the problems there. And I'm sure the same here, that if any school faces problems with the toilets, I would hope that would come up the priority list. Because I see here in the appendix that it's for offices and reception area, when the real issue is the toilets. And I don't think we as an education committee would tolerate, a toilet getting into such a state. And I would hope that, and I'll have that discussion with Lauren out with the meeting to see that, we make that a priority. It's the one thing that we should all be proud of, and not to subject kids to poor condition toilets. My other question here is in 3.3, Chair, early learning and childcare, and if there's an opportunity here, and I know I've got a meeting with Colin scheduled later on in the month to review some of our earlier decisions in terms of early learning and the capital investment, and making reference to, in particular, to the Stranraer area for the 1140s. Is there an opportunity here?
I think we agreed the phasing 3 years ago. I don't think we are in position to look at this again.
Thanks, Chair. I'll take the first one and I'll come back to the ELC one. Toilets are one of the major elements within every school that's their condition is assessed through the condition survey itself. So any major element within a facility that is a condition C or D will be fixed when we're at the school. So, for example, in Sandhead's situation, the toilets have been addressed inside that building. So whilst toilets as a separate entity across all schools won't sit as a separate priority order, the condition of the school's toilets affect where that school sits in the priority list. And when we're at those schools, if they are in poor condition, we do address them at that point in time. In terms of the ELC, the budget movement isn't surplus funding, it's just moving money to a future year because of the impact of DLT2 on the ELC programme. Because we only agreed that last committee cycle, to look at doing works at Laurie Now and Noble Hill, we've had to reprofile some of that money to follow the phasing. So the money's still fully accounted for in terms of that programme. So the opportunity may be limited.
As I say, I'll pick up the issue with Lauren in terms of the, and it's one thing doing a repair, it's another thing looking at the condition. But I'll pick that up with Lauren, and it's not Sunny, it's the Leswalt one.
Right, we move to the recommendations. Can we note 2.1, note 2.2, and agree 2.3? Thank you. Okay, item 8, update on the bridge, Dumfries Learning Town. This is on page 307. Following the decision by full council on 27th of June 2019 to revoke the decision made at Civil Committee to recommend a social enterprise be considered to run the cafe at the bridge, and full council recommendation to agree a suitable and appropriate procurement process, this paper sets out the proposed process to be followed to comply with council standing orders. Members are asked to note progress in the bridge and to agree the use of the open tender process set out in the report. We have Susan and Karen to speak to this. Is there anything you want to add?
Nothing to add, Chair, thank you.
Members? Ivor?
Chair, happy that we've got this back and that we're following this process to get someone in for the cafe. Just under 3.7, the general building update. Can I assume from the table there that there hasn't been 2,300 children or young people through the school curriculum? And if so, how many young people have actually been there? And does a class equate to one period, or is it a double period? Because my understanding is all classes have been set up that you have double periods there. So you could say that if you're talking attendances, it could be half that figure.
Yeah, clearly it's not 2,300 different children. That's 2,300 attendances at class.
But it says it's assumed. If you can't actually tell how many children have been there, how many children are actually attending, and how many children are actually walking about Dumfries? You know, because it's asterisk, and it says this figure assumes 20 students per class. Well, if, say, Queen of the South decided that we'll assume we have an 8,000 capacity, therefore we'll have 8,000 at every game, you know, they count how many folk go actually in. How many people are attending, and do we have kids, maybe it's CMIS isn't working again, who should be there but aren't there?
Chair, that wasn't the purpose of this report. This was really just to give an indication of how well used the building is. If you would like to have an answer to the question about exactly how many young people are using the building on specific days, I can get that for you, Councillor, no problem at all.
Chair, but how can we actually say there's been 114 adult learners? We can count the people in and out. We can count 3,993 conference attendances, but we don't know how many children are there, and we've got a computer system, allegedly if it works, that can tell you where your children are, when they're meant to be in school and when they're not in school.
Sorry, to clarify that point, you're absolutely right. We do know exactly how many children are in the bridge at any given time, and their attendance is mapped. This table was created before the curriculum was confirmed for the start of term for the new curriculum year. So that was an estimate based on the number of classes we wanted to run at the bridge at that time. This table's been taken from something else as an update, as a basic piece of information for background. I can get you the absolute definite figures for that number.
So this is made up?
Adam?
I suppose just a point of clarification that actually for any kids who received exam results over the summer, some of them would have came back and understandably wanted to have changed courses. If it's still the same as it was about 6 years ago, that process takes about 2 weeks to complete. By my calculations, that would have taken us up to last Friday. And obviously these reports were published about last Thursday. So quite quite understandable that an assumed figure would be taken until actually all pupils confirm exactly what course they're going to be studying this year, which would have led to some people, some young people being expected at the bridge who are now no longer going there, but some people who weren't expected at the bridge now going there. For the record, I've been there quite a few times during the school day and seen a vast number of young people attending and really enjoying the spaces available.
Okay, so Susan, if you can send us out, all members out, updated figures on the breakdown of the use by school pupils. Okay. Right, so can we move to the recommendation? Ivan?
Chair, just a possible piece of information. Has the Bridge Trust met? Are they expected to meet, or is it just a fiction of our imagination? Because why are we taking decisions that they should be doing? And I think it was over a year since 2017 that we agreed who would be on it. You know, does it take that long to actually set this up?
It has met on several occasions. No? I think it's met on 3 occasions.
Yeah, I can clarify that. The subcommittee has met once, but that's because the subcommittee's remit is only to look at the business report from the trust, and there isn't a business plan yet from the trust. The separation out from the trust running the building in the first year, separating that to Education Department running the building in the first year was really critical in terms of us having no confusion there. And the council running the building between now and next August has ensured that the building's running very well. We're using the policies that we've got. The young people are in. It's tremendously well used. It's actually, and I know I was trying to look at the positive side, but there is a real positive side in the delay in the fully formed trust, because we're now beginning to see how well the building is used and the opportunities that might be there, and that's given us more time to consider what type of trust it will be in the longer term. We do have an interim group of people who have met 3 times, I think, and there's a meeting scheduled for the 23rd of this month.
Okay, so can we move to recommendations?
Chair, are all staff aware when they're meant to be at the bridge? Because I've had a report of one group of young people who turned up to do was it sociology, or I think it was sociology class, and there was no lecturer there, and the reason being they were told to go there, nobody to look after them, but the tech college starts a week later, therefore there was nobody there to take the class.
Chair, again, I think we've got a unique facility. A lot of the rest of the country are looking at this. We've got a facility that's offering 40%, between that and the networking, offering 40% more courses availability to young people in Dumfries than they had last year, and that's even with a reduction in resource. Because it's new, because it's different, because we're using other people to work there too, there will sometimes be hiccups. We try and iron them out, and if that happened to a group of young people, I'm sure we've apologised. We'll make sure it won't happen again, but the overall benefits in terms of how the bridge is operating at the moment are incredibly positive.
Okay, can we move to recommendations? Can we note 2.1, progress on the bridge, and 2.2, approve the use of the open tender procedure? Okay. So moving on to item 9 on page 313, Dumfries Learning Town Phase 2 update. This report follows the request to bring back to committee the full and detailed cost estimates for the current Dumfries Learning Town Phase 2. The paper highlights the financial challenges associated with the council, but seeks agreement to re-engage with school communities to consider how significant enhancements and investments could take place over a shorter period, with the aim of delivering on the educational aims of DLT2. We have Paul McCulloch to take this paper. Paul, is there anything you want to add?
I'm just happy to take questions, Chair.
Members? Ian?
So just going back to, I made a comment around the business plan, Chair, earlier. I think it's a direct correlation whether it's the Dumfries Learning Town Phase 2 or any further future investment in regards to our school estate, making it fit for purpose, lifting it up to A and B rather than where it sits at the moment. higher levels of capacity. I think we should be spending, we need to invest somehow, but this report, for me, when we read it, okay, we're looking to get a further report, but it just says we just cannot deliver this. The council cannot deliver this. I do think it probably belongs here as some form of, I suppose, this committee should maybe refer it to full council, but this level of investment really sits with full council, and probably through the budget process, I would have thought. It's absolutely right that we have a position on it as a committee, as an education authority, sitting here, but it just reads to me like, okay, we cannot achieve this, we have to do something, unless I'm completely wrong, or Paul can correct me, but Scottish Government, we're saying we've not got enough money. Scottish Government are saying we will no longer fund these types of projects like we used to. They talk about some kind of augmentation. You maybe need clarity in regards to what that actually means. What does that, it's referred to, I think, in paragraph 3.4.7. You'll be aware of it anyways, Paul, on page 315. There's 2 or 3 questions in here, but I just think when I read this, the whole thing says, listen, we really need to put the brakes on, stop, check, what are we actually doing here? We need to be investing in our education services clearly, but that's my understanding of what I've read.
Well, I think the purpose of the report is to show us what was originally planned is not affordable any longer under the current financial circumstances. I mean, you know, we never expected at this stage to be looking to find another 40, 50 million pounds worth of savings over the next 3 years. But we do have a commitment to developing the second phase of the Dumfries Learning Town. And what we need to do is to go out to the schools which have been affected or identified in phase 2 and see what we can do within the budget which is available. That will then come back to this education authority and then presumably be referred back to full finance and procurement in terms of funding. But Paul, was there anything you want to?
Yeah, I suppose just to reiterate that the funding model has moved significantly in terms of Scottish Government support. So the Council will now be required to fund 100% of the capital cost of any project. Scottish Government have been very clear that only condition C and D schools will be supported through the new programme. So it's only right that we take stock of that and address affordability issues, and obviously taking forward the planning for DLT phase 2.
Certainly, as an administration, we are committed, given the state of Dumfries High School, to work with the Scottish Government in terms of obtaining funding from them to build a new high school, to redevelop the academy, and also to redevelop the primary schools which are associated with the progress. Sorry, the phasing. Colin?
Chair, could I just mention, just for information, on the day that this paper was published, I contacted all 5 head teachers involved and all 5 parent council chairs involved out of courtesy, and did express disappointment that it looked like we might not be able to afford the full programme that had been there before, but did speak to them about us being positive about trying to make early and substantial progress where we could, and that message was reasonably well received. This afternoon I'm going out to meet with the head and parent council chair at the academy as a start off of following up on the paper. So we're trying to engage with the schools to make sure that they feel that it hasn't been abandoned by any means. We look to make significant progress across all 5 schools and bring back this paper in November.
And I think the timing is important as well. This enables us to actually make big differences, big improvements in these schools in the short term. Adam?
Thanks. I think Ian touched on it briefly. It's in 3.4.7, and actually the Scottish. We've got Scottish Government ministers going around saying that they're going to invest £2 billion into new schools. When you break that down, actually, I think it's them contributing £1 billion and local government contributing another £1 billion. And then what Paul has just said is that actually, well, that they're not actually going to fund capital costs. And realistically, to make a decision on this, we actually really need to know what that funding model looks like. And I'm aware that, through COSLA, we have been, raising concerns about what the funding model looks like. Is there any indication as to when that funding model will actually be announced and published? I'm aware that the new, and I think the first, learners' estate strategy from government is due to be published this month. And I would imagine that kind of goes hand in hand with what the funding model will look like. But, realistically, you can't have a government saying we're spending £2 billion on new schools and then sort of coming to some accountancy trick on how they actually fund that over the next couple of years. And I think that, for us to make a decision in the future, on this, we really need to see what that funding model looks like in the bare bones, and not just one or two paragraphs in a report, so that we're fully aware of how that works and what that looks like over the whole project, never mind just the construction phase.
Paul?
Chair, yeah, just to answer that question. So in terms of the Scottish Government's funding model, the model is such that the councils will be required to fund 100% of the capital, and the mechanism for payback is around about looking at what that capital cost is and then supporting up to 50% of that. But there's an issue around supported borrowing which needs to be overcome. So the way that's done is that the Scottish Government would then support the revenue life cycle cost of the building. And a key component of that funding condition is that the school is maintained in condition AB over the 25-year period. So that then means that as a council, not only do we have to find the capital, and we understand if it's a condition G school that we get the support up to 50%, but we then need to revenue cost the life cycle elements across the 25 years to ensure that we meet the Scottish Government's funding requirements. So there's quite a bit in that.
Rob?
Thank you, Chairman. Not necessarily agree with the rhetoric of Councillor Wilson's point, but I do agree with the substance, that the funding model is different and we will need to understand it. But we do understand where the financial support, however it ends up being practically configured, is going to be directed, and that's going to be condition C and D schools. Now, clearly that limits the pool in Dumfries into which that money can be directed. The report identifies that's the high school, that's where we should make a start. I take the view, and we also have to consider this in the light of the considerably upgraded, and I would suggest more robust estimates of capital cost that we have. We started off with certain estimates for phase one. The outturn was substantially higher than that, really quite considerably higher than that. We are certainly not in a position now where we can have, in any sense, an optimistic estimate of the cost of phase two and then discover that it has simply increased by that sort of margin. That's simply not sustainable. There's not enough play in the system now for us to be able to absorb that. So while I accept absolutely what Councillor Wilson is saying, that we will need to understand what this 25-year support means and how it will work for the council in practical terms, we also can't get away from the fact that we now understand the costs, I think, in a much more robust way of the original phase two, and we know that it's only condition C or D that's going to be supported in terms of external funding support. You take all these things into consideration, it's my view that what's been set out in the paper is the most sensible way forward. It will, notwithstanding that it's somewhat different, nevertheless constitute a very significant commitment by this council into learning estate in Dumfries, which is very much in need of it. And we can only spend what we can afford. And we certainly cannot take the risk of sucking resource out of a learning estate in the rest of the region, because we are Dumfries and Galloway Council. So we have to do the best that we can while maintaining our commitments to maintaining learning estate right across a very large region, which has other schools which will in due course, and some in fairly pressing short order, need quite a stack of investment themselves. I think that all things taken into account, this is the most sensible and viable way forward, and I'm certainly happy to move the recommendations, Chairman.
Yeah, I think we're in a position to actually carry out condition surveys. I think that contract has been allocated, in which case can we prioritise the schools within the DLT phase two in order to get an idea of what the condition is and the costings associated with that, and have the conversation with the school communities in terms of what they see as being the priorities. But we do reaffirm our commitment to the high school, enhancement of the academy and of the other primary schools within DLT2. And I think it's important we make rapid progress with regard to this. This thing's been hanging around for far too long with no obvious progress being made in terms of this. Willie?
Yeah, I think Rob Davison's made the point, Chair, and while we're looking at the Dumfries Learning Town and Phase 2 update and the position that we are now in, I think we've got to have an eye to the whole estate, because we have rural schools, we have schools facing similar problems that may not reach the CD school, but nevertheless they do need investment, and we've got to look at that. And as the years go on, they will deteriorate. So I think we've got to also see what the impact is, not only in the Dumfries Learning Town in terms of the change, but how that's going to affect the whole estate and what investment will be needed for some of our more rural schools and throughout the school estate. So I hope we don't lose sight of that and only concentrating on Dumfries. I think we've got to see what the impact is on the other investment that will be needed throughout the whole of the schools that we got in the portfolio.
I do think, Chair, that the November report's particularly critical, really important that we get enough detail in there that allows us to, certainly in terms of timing with the government, if we were to be making a bid for the high school, for a new school, November's a really the right time to be doing that. And in addition, being able to come back in November with a sort of financial overview from Paul Garrett that looks ahead, right, in terms of the impact across the rest of the state is important. So we hope to, after being out to the schools, speaking to the schools, come back with quite a detailed report that might allow you to make some really concrete decisions about moving DLT2 forward in November.
Ira?
Chair, when we go out to the public for consultation, for my clarity, are we saying that it's going to be a rebuild of Dumfries High School plus hopefully some refurbishment of the other schools over an extended period, or are we looking at the North East Campus scenario plus refurbishments of the other schools? And I think I've got the idea of what the funding is, possibly, but maybe that'll move as time goes on. It seems to be if we spend the money, we'll get half the revenue to pay back the money. Right.
Just to clarify those 2 points, yes, let's say, for example, a school cost £30 million, then it may well be calculated that over 25 years, you're spending 45 million in terms of the upkeep, and the government would give you £15 million in revenue. It's that sort of idea, just to simplify it a wee bit. In terms of the implications of this paper would suggest that the only government funding would associate with the Dumfries High School alone, and therefore the implications of this paper would be refurbishment and enhancement of the other 4 schools separately to the high school. But that's for you to decide in November when we bring back details of costs and possibilities.
Is that based on the full or the 80%? Was it 80% capacity? I think there's 2 figures in there.
The 80% capacity is this was when we were looking at the fullest scheme with all the rebuilds. So if it had been all new buildings, what we're saying is the original scheme included space for young people to come back into Dumfries who currently don't attend in Dumfries, whereas the actual pattern of attendance suggests that you could afford to assume they won't necessarily, and that's why there were 2 possibilities. But even the slightly smaller scheme was £146 million. So that idea doesn't apply to 1 new school and 4 refurbishments. Okay.
Ian?
Let's be very brief, Chair. But I do think that there's a risk element to this. So geez, when the information comes back, Lan alluded earlier, gave us an example where Sandhead doubled in price from a time at point A to point B. This may be a similar scenario, it may not. So is it 161 million now? It'll go to 320 million by the time we get to November. So the information's got to be very accurate, I think, in regards to what comes back. That is a risk. But, and going back to some of the points that have been made by other members, I think there is a bigger picture here in regards to transformation. We need to be looking at the whole school estate, and that must not be forgotten. Dumfries Learning Town Phase 2 is very important, but the whole school estate in regards to having a fit for purpose school estate as we go forward as an education authority has to be looked at as well.
Chair, I'll ask Paul just to speak about optimism bias in terms of what we do bring back to you, but just to be clear, the recommendations are asking you to agree that we can't afford that scheme at 146 or 161, that we won't be looking at that if that's what you agreed today. We'll be looking at something different that we bring back, but we'll be looking for Paul to ensure that it's pretty accurate in terms of the maximum level of spend.
So the question of accuracy is a very important one, and in terms of early cost estimation, and remember these things are estimates. What we need to do is take cognizance of the stage we're at within the project process and within the design process. So what we've done correctly here is apply Treasury Green Book guidance in terms of a tool called optimism bias, and what that optimism bias does is allow for the costing of uncertainty, because that's where we are currently. So we don't understand what's in the ground, we don't understand the services that support the site, we don't understand the asbestos implications, etc., etc., etc. So it's the right thing to do in order that an informed decision can be taken earlier in the process, in order that we don't go to a stage and then discover it's unaffordable. So we're doing absolutely the right thing here, and as we come back in November, we will have more concrete costs. But I would suggest there'll still be an element of optimism bias in there because of the fact of where we are.
It has to be remembered that DLT Phase 1, the original estimate was 45 million, the final cost was 75.6 million, so that was an overspend, if you like, of 68%. So we do need to be careful we don't overpromise with these projects. Okay. Can we go to the recommendations? Can we note 2.1, note 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, agree 2.5, agree 2.6, and agree 2.7 with officers bringing back a report to the future committee. That will be the November committee. Okay, thanks, members. So moving on to item 10, early learning and childcare charging for additional hours, which is on page 369. Okay. As part of the fees and charges work within last year's budget setting, members agreed an income target for charging for nursery places. This paper sets out the progress to date on this work and reassures that we as a council will not be going into competition with the PVI sector, as places will only be offered where there is no PVI group provision, and ask members to agree the criteria for allocation. Lauren will answer any questions. Gillian is also already departed for air. Okay, Lauren, is there anything you want to add to the paper?
Thanks, Chair. No, nothing to add to the paper itself, but happy to take any questions on it.
Members? No?
Thank you. Lauren, it was really just a question about the funding for this. Obviously, if parents are topping up sessions already, will the budget to those classes be increased, or will the money be paid directly to the school? Because obviously, at the moment, the funding for early learning and childcare in schools is allocated on number of children in the setting, and money is set aside for snack now as well. So if you suddenly have an influx of additional children increasing hours, it's like taking on additional children. So you would need extra money for snacks. If they're staying all day, free school meals. There's other implications. So it's the kind of nitty-gritty of the finances for this. Will the school receive the additional funding into the nursery DSM budget, or does the money the parents pay come direct to school?
It's a bit of a mix, if I'm honest. The way that the funding for funded children works just now, as you say, the snack money is paid directly to the nursery so that they can account for that. It would be the same in this instance. So the suggested £5.17 charge to the parent part of that money would come to the school directly to cover for the additional resources required for the child being inside the nursery, whether it was snacks, whether it was activity-based stuff that they were doing, and any residual money left over within that would go towards the income generation that was targeted through the budget template.
Thank you. I suppose I've got a question in here. It's in a similar vein. Excuse me. I suppose it's similar. It was what was the expected income generation? Because I thought it was through the budget process. This was partly agreed, and where will it be spent? So you probably answered that in real terms. Apart from what is the expected income generation from it, and you've touched on it already. I think it's within the report, but I wondered. And as far as it being impact assessed and engaging with the wider partnership organisations that deliver this along with us, have we had any discussions with them at all? And what was if there was, what kind of outcome? What was the result of that?
The projected annual saving into the future is £111,000. Now that was predicated on a desktop exercise that looked at the assumption that for every nursery setting, they are staffed appropriately for the number of children that are there. However, a member of nursery staff can have between 1 and 8 children in front of them. So the assumption was that potentially there would be one member of staff in every nursery setting that might only have half that number of children. So there could be, they took an average and said, look, let's assume there's 3 spaces available within that nursery. However, some of the detail that actually is coming to the surface now that needs to be fed into that is actually, is there physical capacity in that nursery to go beyond the ratio? Do the children exist in that area? Are the children already taking their full funded hours, or is there funded hours available in the background as well? So all of these things are actually going to reduce that potential value of income generation into the future. I think that's why we're looking to do a pilot, to try and get an idea of the level of funding that can be associated within individual areas itself. The pilot as well, and the aspiration that we would look to only provide this service in an area where there is no existing partner provider protects the partners. We have had limited discussions with them, and their sense is that they do see this as competition, and actually it would be, if you offered it in Dumfries, where you have a huge selection of partner providers, or if you offered it Annan, where there's partners there, you need to be very careful with the pricing on what those hours are charged out at. The 517 is in line with what we pay to our partner providers, but that value is different for every partner right across the whole authority. So I think that the sensible approach is to take this through the pilot, see is there a realistic income generation through this, and then consider how that rollout goes beyond there. And it might be that it's just kept to those areas where there is no flexibility and choice for parents to go beyond what the funded hours provide.
Thank you. Sorry, Larry, can I come back to what you said there about the partner providers? Because obviously, if you're in partnership with the authority to deliver early learning and childcare, you are assessed by Care Inspector and Education Scotland, but where I work, which is in one of these areas to be piloted, we have 4 childminders that the school work with. We've got really good relationships. They don't know about this. And a lot of my children do time with them to get that home environment and then time with me. But I worry there will be groups of parents who suddenly go, oh, the school can do these hours, and there's 4 people out of work if parents opt to do that, which I know they're not in partnership with the authority, but they still provide childminding services in the local area. As I say, we've worked very closely with them to build that relationship. So I would have a concern that it is going to have an impact, maybe not of partner providers, but of other people who run their own businesses from home.
And that's absolutely a valid point, and that's one of the risks with the suggestion that's on the table here. Information did go out to all childminders who are registered with us. What we're not aware of those that are childminders that aren't actually registered as a provider through the local authority. I think again it's back to let's prove what this can deliver through the pilot itself. There are evidence coming back from some childminders that suggest actually for them this is actually beneficial because they're doing a pick-up service after school hours, so they're having to retain a space for a child for the whole day, whereas if the after-school hours is offered through the local authority, then they can release those spaces all day. So actually, for them, that they see that as a financial benefit. So I think it's going through the pilot will give us all of those bits of evidence to prove what's the right direction to go with this.
Could I make a suggestion that you perhaps look at the Care Inspectorate database? Because it gives you who the childminders are who are registered with them, but not necessarily in partnership with the local authority. And you could maybe share this information with them so I don't get it in the neck. Thanks.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. We did have a look at the register, and we also contacted Scottish Childminders Association so they could put it out to all of their registered childminders, because I think we are in partnership with around 40, 46, but I think there's about 120 on the books within Dumfries and Galloway.
Just pick up on that point, that's what I was kind of alluding to. I mean, I believe anybody that's delivering that service is in partnership with the council in real terms. But I think in recommendation, I think it's 2.4, we'll look for a further report. It'd be good to see that kind of information that you've been out, spoke to them, what effect has that, positive or negative, or just a neutral position. When that comes back, it'd be really good to see that, Chairman, if that's acceptable.
As it says in the report, there is going to be an update comes back in May 2020, next year, so that will consider that sort of issue. Okay, so can we move to Jim?
Thanks, Chair. Just a small matter, just to ensure the parental or carer letter is coordinated with the criteria. There are 6 criteria in the letter, but we are agreeing 7 in Appendix 1. Thank you.
Yeah, good spot. Thank you.
Will you then, John?
Thank you, Chair. And I'm conscious of the fact I've got a meeting scheduled for Collins. I'm not going to rehearse some of the issues just now, but I'm interested in 3.1 as we move to phase 3 in early access to early learning and childcare. 15 more nurses now have the ability to offer up to 1140 hours. And what I'm hearing from some of the schools in Stranraer is that they are not able to, where we've got nurseries, they are not able to offer the 1140, and that's due to a number of places available, logistics and a number of issues. And I will get more detail for Colin for us to meet. And again in 3.6, in the meeting this duty next round of content planned, and we will gather further information around delivery models.
There isn't a 3.6.
Sorry, Chair, I'm referring to 3 point in the meeting. This duty, the next round of consultation is planned to take place in term, and we'll gather information. I hope that consultation is looking at the.
I think you're on item 11.
Item 11.
Yeah.
Still on 10.
Can we still
Apologies, Chair.
John?
Jump one.
Thank you, Chair. Just a small point. All the way through talks about purchasing additional hours. Can parents purchase additional part hours, or will that be part to up to each individual nursery?
The purchase of hours can be as flexible as the nursery can accommodate in reality. The key criteria is there a member of staff that incurs no additional cost to the local authority, and if there is an additional member of staff there, then if it's again within a 1 to 8 ratio, if there's 7 spaces, then 7 spaces can be sold per hour across the full day, and parents would have the choice of whether it's a single hour or whether it's however many were available in that location.
Any members, can we move to the recommendation? Can we agree 2.1, 2.2, 2.3 and 2.4? Thank you. Right, moving on to item 11 on page 375. Early learning and childcare planning for the expansion towards 1140 hours. This paper provides members of the information around phase 3 in the enrolment process for academic year 1920, together with the impact on workforce growth. Members are also informed that the procurement process for prospective partner providers starts on the 10th of September, with engagement sessions taking place across the authority with an anticipated contracts awards being made in January 2020. The consultation process continues around delivery of ELC. Stakeholders and feedback will be provided to members once concluded. Once again, we have Lauren to speak to this. Lauren, is there anything you want to add?
Thank you, Chair. No, I think it's quite a brief paper, given the regularity of how often we bring back. So there's limited update in here. But I think one of the key things moving forward is around the consultation and what that brings. Obviously, that process hasn't started yet. The question base will be around the consultation that we used the last time, and it will focus purely on the delivery models. I think we haven't had any issues around the model that we've adopted so far, so I would anticipate that we would have a favourable response to that. Thank you, Chair.
Can I come in, Willie? Jimmy, see what I mean? No, I've made reference to 3.1 where it says here that more nurseries now have the ability to offer up to 1140 hours. And what I'm hearing in Stranraer in some of the schools is that they cannot offer the 1140, and that has to do with location, logistics and so forth. And my reference to 3.6, and Lauren has just touched on it, is the consultation, and in there it talks about hours of operation and location demand. And I hope we can pick this up, and I will pick it up with Colin when I do meet with him, in terms of how we deliver this 1140 hours, and that it is located where it's suitable for the parents and not in at least 2 miles away, because we may not have got the location correct. But I will pick it up with Colin when we meet. My other just, and maybe someone could reference, maybe it should have been in the other report, Chair. It's just on the announcement that I heard only within the last 2 weeks, where there seems to be the Scottish Government got their figures wrong, and we're down, more than 25% of places. Is that having an effect on Dumfries and Galloway in terms of the estimated, they allowed for 20,000 children throughout the whole of Scotland, and they were 6,000 plus short in their funding allocation. That was an announcement made within the last couple of weeks.
I would need to look into that. I think what I can say, though, is in terms of the ring-fenced funding that's come down to support ELC, that hasn't changed. That is still there. That's still protected, and that was based on an allocation made a couple of years ago, so that remains unaltered. I think in terms of numbers of children that we're seeing, our projection for full rollout in 2020 is that we would have 3,290 children across the board. So that's eligible 2-year-olds, 3, 4s, and deferred 5s. The projection is still based on NHS birth data. It's still based on National Record Scotland intelligence. I think we may see slightly underneath that if the current trends of uptake stay as they are, but the number of children still exist. It's because nursery provision isn't a legal requirement to take it up. Some families and children decide not to take it, and that's where we see a slight variance in the numbers that we've projected from.
I thought it was quite a positive report, actually, when I read it. You see, it shows the impacts. I suppose the only thing that was missing for me, Lauren, I think, is that, so we're seeing an increase in numbers. That's bound to be positive, I would think, in regards to families, children, so on and so forth. It'll probably have benefits to the wider economy as well. We're not seeing any of that type of information. I'm quite keen to see that, because this is a positive, it's a good news story in real terms. And it's quite clear there's about 1,000 kids. There's from paragraph 3.3, children, sorry. Paragraph 3.3, there's a £500,000 positive impact to our partner organisations, according to, for what I can read into that. So the positive stuff's in here, but actually the families, the parents and the children in particular, the positive benefits for that. It'd be good to see some of that information contained there as well, if we can collect that and roll it up into some kind of report.
Well, given that the full rollout August next year, I think it might be worthwhile waiting until then before we collate that, because I don't know what percentage of youngsters have got access at the moment, about 20%, 30%. Yeah. So I think it'd be worthwhile seeing the full impact after that. I don't know whether that's something which this committee can collate the data on, or whether it would be another committee within the council. Okay.
I just add to that, Chair, that nationally the Scottish Government are talking about doing a measure of exactly those things, but they wouldn't do that until 2024, until they've seen full cohorts through. So it might be that we can look at something more localised before then.
Okay. Can we move to the recommendations? Can we note 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 2.4? Okay. Moving on to item 12 on page 379. This is the annual update report, school meals performance. This report provides members with an overview of the performance of the school meal uptake for both primary and secondary school meals and presents last year's performance statistics due to the delay in this year's healthy living data not being available until 9th of September. The report also highlights the forthcoming updated school meals legislation and provides information on the programme of further developments of the catering service. We have Alan Mawson to speak to this. Is there anything you want to add, Alan?
Yeah, through yourself, Chair, just to make sure members got an amended Appendix 2 supplement that was in. There was an error in the one that done, just to make sure members got that one.
This is the one with the percentages in. I think they're about to get it. This is replacing the table on page 391. Has everybody got it? Okay, everybody happy? Right. Okay, members? Adam?
Yeah, Chair, just reading some of this guidance, on page 441, it talks about some studies that have been done about eating red meat, and I just kind of feel that actually, what is the impact going to be on the service and any associated costs? But also actually, what about we can't control what a child eats outside of school, and if we have families living in poverty, the chances of them eating red meat, which is last time I checked, an essential part of a healthy, balanced diet, but we are going to restrict the amount that's available in school. I'm just a bit concerned that actually we're looking too much at studies and not actually just looking at everything in moderation. I think is what should be. So I just think I'm struggling with the whole thing, to be quite honest. What is the impact going to be in our service? But actually, what about that wider picture of balanced diets for school children, and we can't control what they have outside schools. I'm struggling to understand what benefit this is going to have, because the first thing I see is more kids going down high streets and going to a chip shop, which is going to be even worse than the current situation.
Yeah, through yourself, Chair. Yeah, I think we concur with them statements. I think from where the service sits, they were at phase 2. First phase was Hungry for Success, when we seen many years ago launched, and had a significant impact on the service then as far as uptake was concerned, and certainly through the voice of Dumfries and Galloway from myself, when we've been speaking to Scottish Government, we've been raising our concerns regarding impact on uptake of what we would see as more significant changes within what we can serve and what is not beyond the school gates as far as them restrictions are concerned as well. We are working, as we're trying to evidence within the report, about trying to mitigate them as best as we can moving forward. But certainly we have, certainly through our APSI networks and Assist soft facilities management networks, we have been challenging Scottish Government around impact will be of a negative one, and that's not been defended by Scottish Government in the sense that they would say that they're not aware of that. But they're pushing it back to local authorities to then be innovative round about trying to minimise that impact. I think the studies that the Scottish Government have done on the red meat are well tested, and I think they were comfortable in what they presented in that, but certainly as the report lays out, we're majorly concerned about the uptake impact that this new legislation will have on the authority.
the paper on this came before the Children and Young People Board at COSLA, the end of last month, I think, and that was what was expressed. You know, even if a child takes a school lunch every day of the academic year, it only accounts for about 1 in 6 of the meals they're actually taking. And not only is the red and processed meat an issue, the fact that only brown bread will be supplied, and that fruit juices and smoothies won't be available any longer. And I think it's difficult. It's difficult for me now. I was a scientist for a long time to understand the difference between an apple and an apple which has been homogenized and the juice squeezed out of it in terms of the sugar content. So I think we are in danger possibly of pushing youngsters down the street to get the sort of food which you would normally eat at home, which they're more accustomed to. But I think, as Alan says, that's not within our remit other than to lobby with these concerns. Yeah. Ivor?
Chair, it's maybe opportune that Hungry for Success came out. My youngest has just moved from primary to secondary, and in primary, whenever he came on a shorter day, I know it's only about 10 minutes either side or something, he would come in and he was ravenous. He now goes to secondary and he gets his meal deal, and he never eats anything when he comes in. Now, this is maybe just something that's reported, but you get primary 1 kids going in and they get their school meal, and half the stuff is thrown in the bin. Reason being, it's the same size as what a primary 7 kid gets. And the primary 7 kid is always sitting there looking to get seconds because he's not getting enough. Maybe something, and that's a cause for concern, that, you know, he comes out of school at night and he's only 3 months for primary into secondary, 2 months, and he's getting a good quality meal. Now in secondary, I think it's the meal deal 195, his baguette or whatever he gets, but he's not as hungry now. Are we feeding the right amount of food to the children? Every child's different, I realise, but it just seemed funny that it was one thing that I've noticed. You know, he's not hungry now, and is that affecting children later on in a primary day, that they're not concentrating? So they might, if they were topped up, be able to work better.
Yeah, through yourself, Chair. I think if you go black and white within the legislation, the portions in primary are very much fixed. Portions in secondary are marginally larger to accommodate that. I think what we've got, you know, when you look at P6 and P7, they can be towering above you or me, and there's certainly that's an impact on that. The legislation allows a bit of flexibility in that, but certainly from a local authority side, we make sure care managers are aware that they normally are smaller in the portion for the primary 1 to 2 and 3 coming in, and we allow flexibility within that for certainly the upper school, what we see in that, and that's at the discretion of that. I have been in schools when some of the larger P7s are getting seconds, and it's one of them things where we turn a blind eye on the back of that where we've got with that, because there's a cost implication. But I think that there is a relevance on that. I think in the secondaries as well, I'm not quite sure on your own personal perspective, but normally they're purchasing something in the morning break and then purchasing something at lunchtime. Often the case that they have a bigger spend in secondary school than what there was in primary school, but certainly locally we try to tackle that by offering flexibility within the portion size. In most cases. Chair.
Tracy?
Thank you, Chair. We're talking about then a smaller amount of children, young students, taking up the school meals. Is there a mechanism in place to work out how many school meals are needed per school? Because I know of some schools where the students have to go in break time and order their meal. Now, the first year and the second year students get front of the queue for this because they're not allowed to leave the school. But if you don't get in that queue and you don't manage in the break time to have ordered your meal, when it comes to lunchtime, there isn't anything left for the older kids, so they're kind of forced out when they maybe would stay in sometimes. So do we have like a sort of mechanism to collate roughly, or is there only a certain amount per school?
So no, there's not any certain amount per school. The schools that we've got, a lot of schools that run the pre-order that allows us to get better management of food costs.
But from that there is the experience of the catering staff will be and should be producing enough food for that school. Where that can be a challenge at times is one when the weather changes. The weather changes from a reasonably good day to a heavy wet day, then we can see an influx of kids that would normally go down the street and impacts on us from that. But certainly within that, they've got product within the line that we would call as quick product that should allow them the flexibility of putting something on, albeit that challenges the legislation, but we allow that flexibility in the school to do that so that they should be able to leave, no child should go hungry. So that is in there, but there's certainly not, we don't say you produce 100 meals a day, and that's the limit you've got. There's certainly, and all of the units, certainly in secondary schools, have enough capacity to be holding quite a lot of stock because they only pick up one delivery a week from that. So there shouldn't really be an issue in there, and we're not restrictive on what that production of product is within any of the units.
Doug?
Yeah, thanks for that, Alan. I'm looking through this and trying not to be amused, sorry, but your questionnaire went out to parents at Georgetown Primary School. And one of the biggest concerns I had was the lack of ham. You know, and we're trying to move away from that, as you say before. And also they're stating in page 507 that they'd probably stay on and have the lunch if it was a bigger portion. Well, we're trying to get away from bigger portions as well. So I think I just recall there was an item in the news where a boy down south, someone went blind because he was eating chips and pies and no fruit and vegetables. So I can understand the struggle you've got, and that's what I'm trying to say, and it's very positive the way you're moving forward with it. It's trying to educate the parents and understand that struggle. Thanks.
Can we move to the recommendations? Can we note 2.1, note 2.2, note 2.3, and thanks, Alan, for the very interesting report and all the background information in terms of the nutrition, etc. Thanks. Okay, members, I'm conscious of the time, but I'm also conscious of the fact we're nearly at the end of the public session. We've only got two exempt items to do that, so I'll push on to complete the session this morning, and then you can have a very healthy buffet, which I'm informed is now available. Okay, so if we move to item 13 on 531. This is Education and Learning Revenue Budget Monitoring Report 2019-20 for the period ended 30th of June 2019. The Revenue Budget Report, Monitoring Report, provides details of the 2019-20 budget for education and learning, and also initial outturn forecast of a break-even position based on position as of the 30th of June 2019. The main budget pressure of £255,000 relating to children currently supported through day placements with external providers continues to be reviewed by the Service to minimize the extent of spending above the budget. General budget management to identify mitigating measures is ongoing to result in a balanced outturn budget. There are no major concerns at this time. Carol Need and Colin Penton will be present. Is there anything to add to your report?
No, nothing further to add, but happy to take any questions.
Members? Ivor?
Chair, on the table on page 537, all the forecasted remaining savings requiring ongoing action, etc., are to be met. What percentage or how much of the, say, the focus of support for learners service, 706,000, it says we'll struggle to meet that, but other areas will be identified. How much do you actually think we will meet out of the 706,000?
Currently, a lot of it's to do with ERVS cases, so it's like the timing on when the actual individual officers will actually go. We don't have that exact figure of the kind of shortfall depending on that, but it's something that we could provide members if so requested at further date. No, there's a small part of that savings related to the ERVS savings. The majority of it was related to contracts and stuff like that with other organisations and stuff like that. I wouldn't like to say definitely on top of my head, but it's definitely something we can provide if you require counsel.
Can we move to the recommendations on page 531? Can we note 2.1, 2.2, 2.3 and 2.4. Okay, I've got under item 14, no other business deemed urgent. Therefore, can we move to item 15, Local Government Scotland Act 1973, and can we agree the adoption of the resolution to exclude